Welcome back, Beyond listeners. I'm Dr. Flora. I am so happy that you guys are here. One, two, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for taking the time to listen in because you are dedicated to bettering yourself. You are dedicated to self-growth and change. And that is probably the most meaningful thing that you can do for you today. So thanks for joining. Today, we are going to talk about boundaries, how to set them, especially in our South Asian community. Hi, everyone. You are listening to Beyond, and I'm your host, Dr. Flora. Listen, life is hard. You don't have to do it alone. As a mindset coach, physician, mom, and an infertility warrior, I have mastered techniques to help move you towards contentment and growth. I can't wait to go along with this crazy ass life journey with you while making sure you feel like your best self. This podcast is meant to have you feel unstuck from your rut and less alone. Let's do this. All right, Niki, thank you so much for being here. I am going to start it off with the first question. Tell me the first time you set a boundary with a parent or an elder. What happened? How did it feel? I want to hear it all.
So that's a great question. I mean, I grew up in a pretty conservative family, I would say. Like even wearing shorts was looked down upon by my grandparents, right? I think for me, the first time I really had to set a boundary was actually around a secret relationship, dating my now husband, and my parents were not honestly happy with it because we started dating at 17. And, as you can imagine, South Asian culture. And at that time, it was not allowed. So around the age of 21 or 22, I mean, it was going to be a thing, right? Like we wanted to get married and my parents were still against it. And then one day my mom came into my room. We had a chat. She was going to come and basically talk me out of talking to him and not being in this relationship. And I remember that being the first time where I actually stood up for myself because I'd always kind of just listened to her and, I didn't want to disappoint her. I respected my parents. I tried to be a good daughter kind of check off the boxes in that sense. But at the same time, I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. And I had to set that boundary with her and have that open conversation. Like, this is not, I understand you're trying to keep me, you want the best for me. But at the same time, this is how I feel. Like, I feel like this is he's a great guy. It's a great relationship. There is no real reason I see that you're not okay with it or not happy with this. And she was kind of taken aback, and it kind of set her mind to start thinking about respecting what I thought as well. She has her own people-pleasing tendencies. Like, I think that's kind of how it stemmed in me as well. And she was afraid of what others were going to say about me being with this guy. And it took her time to stand up for herself and set her boundaries and have that, communication with me around it. And so I think, kind of stemming from that, understanding her perspective, we've come a long way. But that was, I think, the first time. And then now living with my in-laws and having a joint family, it's something that we have to practice almost on a daily basis because, sometimes you don't know what kind of environment you're going to be in or what kind of reaction you're going to get or, silent treatment. And so I've had to learn how to set boundaries or even show how communication needs to happen so that boundaries or expectations are met on both sides. So I guess that would be my first sort of experience with setting boundaries.
Yeah, I think especially in the South Asian culture, self-sacrifice and putting others first is seen as a love language. And so I think we are as first generation, were you born here? Remind me.
I was.
Yeah, so as first generation here, and the kids of immigrants, it is a interesting situation where we're kind of learning from each other, and our parents are learning from a lot of our strong-willed personalities. And I do have to say, back then, I held boundaries, just not well. And so
Hmm.
I would come off as very bullish. I am a strong personality when it comes to my family, and I have lots of opinions. And I remember when I first started holding boundaries with my parents, which I had to have been in my teens, it created a lot of conflict. It created a lot of frustration. It created a lot of distance, which is not the purpose of boundaries. I want to make this clear for everybody. Boundaries are not meant to cut people out of your life or create distance. Now, there's a time and place for that for sure. But that is not the purpose of holding a boundaries. Boundaries are for you, not the other person. It allows you to take control. It allows you to feel empowered over the conversation and respected. And these
I
are
love that.
invisible guidelines for you. And once you are able to hold boundaries in a respectful way, it does increase your bandwidth to connect to the other person in different ways on different levels. And so every relationship looks different. So I'm really happy to hear that, you were able to communicate with your mom. And on the flip side, your mom reciprocated as well to a certain extent, right? I think it's always a learning process. So how has your relationship changed with your parents and actually with your in-laws since you guys live together, since you've been more vocal about your needs?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been a journey. And as you mentioned, being a first generation, second generation here, they've gone through their own journey because they're breaking their own cycles
Yeah.
and, raising us in a new world. And then we are obviously, in a different generation. We're now, being able to do a lot more with our careers because our parents set us up for that. So there's definitely a lot of growth in that process and just being able to understand each other emotionally. And just to piggyback on what you said, I completely agree around the boundary. There's such a negative reputation around boundary setting, and it's not necessarily a negative thing. It is a limit that you place on yourself because maybe there's certain thoughts or certain things that are not in your best interest. And it's important to be aware of that. There's negative talks and that guilt tripping that you maybe makes you feel like you're being taken advantage of without appreciation. And it's not about changing other people, right? And it's really
Yes.
about setting the limits for yourself. So with my parents, I think we've come a long way. Obviously, after you get married, it's like completely different than when you were in your teens. And I remember still when I was married, my mom would call me at like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock when I'm working, and she's like, "Oh, are you still sleeping?" I'm like, "No, it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon." Like, who's sleeping? And it's so funny because now she's retired. So I
Yeah.
call her at 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock. And I'm like,
That
"Are
is
you
so
sleeping?"
funny. I had the exact same conversation with someone yesterday who was like, I keep calling my parents at like my normal business hours, which are like, we all wake up early, right? When we have young kids and we got to get stuff ready. And yeah, she kept calling her retired parents and waking them up in the morning.
In the middle of their nap. I'm like, that must be
Yes.
nice. So, yeah, so I mean, things, I think things are flip flop now, but I think my mom and my parents are kind of, I feel like, growing into this new phase because they're learning more, especially we're becoming more open about our emotions and how we're feeling and having these conversations. Like my mom knows I talk about relationships a lot and the relationship with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, how that's evolved. And she's grown through the process. And now she also has a daughter-in-law and my other sister is getting married. So I think she's, trying to be the person that's open. And she wasn't able to be there for us emotionally because of working constantly. So I think she
Yeah.
sees that now and tries to do that for us at this point. But I think it's grown a lot. I think with my in-laws, it's very different because you when you get married, you go into a new family and there's different expectations and different styles of working. We are Gujarati, like we came from the same background, we have the same like spiritual practices, but still there's very different lifestyle, right? Very different ways of thinking, different personalities. So you have to adapt to that. I grew up with like a very easygoing family who never really took anything to heart, but obviously living in a different family, there's different expectations. And
Hmm.
so there was a lot of growing pains initially. There was a lot of emotional and generational trauma that had been silently, expressed in the home. And, my mother-in-law was working and things like, dishes and cooking and, things like that, normal routine activities would cause conflicts and negative emotions being expressed. You try to keep the peace. You try to make everyone feel like positive and have a good environment in the house. And it was hard for me initially to have those difficult conversations with my in-laws about their emotions and what they're feeling and why things are being expressed in a certain way. We would actually have to sit down, and that's where we started doing these family meetings. When I first got married, before the kids, we would sit down
Hmm.
and talk. And obviously you think like everyone's living in the house, everyone's should be talking, but it's so crazy in this busy life that we don't actually often sit down and talk. It's
It's
not
usually
it's everyone's
logistics.
so many logistics, so many different schedules. Everyone had so much going on between work and all of that. And so we would set a time, sit down, talk, and we would have difficult conversations. We would have to talk about like, things that happen in the home. What are you feeling? Some individuals, they're not open to sharing feelings because emotions were not talked about back in the day. But I think that's where it's so important, like for our generation to be aware not only of what that generation may not have learned or learn how to express and give them grace in that perspective, but also kind of coach each other through this journey of what are your emotions, what are your expectations, and how can we work together to come up with a mutual solution. Like, we can't be mind readers. We don't know what
Absolutely. That's the biggest
others are looking
mistake I
for.
see, even with between couples. So, a lot of my
Mm-hmm.
clients, I coach women, and most of them do have partners. And it's like, oh, how come my significant other just didn't know I'm mentally overwhelmed? Like, we talk about this invisible mental load that many women carry because we are wired differently. I mean, science backs that up. And a lot of the times men are just naturally better at compartmentalizing, whether it's from, social cultural expectations and teachings versus, being wired differently. And so when they are at work, they're at work and not thinking about 25 million other things. When a lot of us are at work, a lot of us, when I say women, we're notorious to quote unquote multitask, but multitasking among different categories has been proven to not be productive. So if you're multitasking within your job role, that's one thing. But if you're like in the middle of work and you're like, oh, I need to make my grocery list. Oh, let me go buy whatever I need to on Amazon or make my Instacart list, that's multitasking to a fault. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important for all that. You're right to be in the open and express because you don't know what you don't know. And after some practice in the conversation and making the other people within your household aware of what needs to be done or what you are carrying, then they can share the burden. Delegation is something on our to-do list. So even if we're delegating tasks, that is also a heavy mental load. And so a lot of the times in the beginning, when my husband and I got married, he was like, just tell me what I need to do. And I'm like, well, I shouldn't tell you that we need to do the dishes. And we would just get into
Yes.
these back and forth arguments because he's like, just tell me and I'll do it. I have no problem doing it. But that was the problem. The problem was the mental load wasn't being shared until we started sharing outwardly, when that invisible mental load becomes visible, that's when I think the household can win. So I'm really happy that you guys are
Yes.
taking the time to unpack, which it's not a negative thing. I think in the Indian culture, a lot of this is seen as negative when we're expressing disappointment or expressing being unhappy with something. It's not a reflection on the other person. It's a reflection on yourself, actually. You're unhappy with where things are. And the family goal is to work cohesively, not just your goal.
Yes.
So everyone needs to be on the same page.
Yes, and that's a big focus for us. Like when we have these conversations, it's not, and my husband's really good at mediating these
That's good.
conversations too. And we have this sort of silent rule, when it comes to your parents, you need to take the lead. When it comes to my parents, I take the lead. And
Hmm.
so with his
Wait, but I'm going
parents,
to pause though. That doesn't mean that the other partner stays silent. So
yes,
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 taking the lead, but you guys need to be on the same page. Otherwise, boundaries do not work within couples. Like it doesn't work.
exactly.
You guys need to be on the same page. Otherwise, it's a lot for one person to carry. Do you ever feel like you are juggling a million things at once? Especially if you are a business owner. You're trying to grow your business, but also, run your business. It can feel like you are drowning in your to-dos with barely a moment to breathe, let alone dream bigger. I have been there. Now, look, I tried hiring a gamut of virtual assistants, but it often felt like there was just one other thing on my to-do list. I had to spoon feed tasks, constantly check in, recheck their work, and still worry about things slipping through the cracks. It wasn't until I found Savannah and Natalie at Every Virtual Solutions that I truly understood the difference between help and the right kind of help. They have extensive marketing, development, and executive assistant backgrounds so they can take the weight off of your shoulders so you can focus on what you do best, being the visionary. Book a free discovery call on their website and mention this episode for a 10% discount for your first 6 months. Head over to everyvirtualsolutions.com. That's EVERAE virtualsolutions.com. Whether it's web design, content creation, email management, social media, PR, or anything in between, I know you will find a way to work together to lighten your load. It's time to end the burnout and start focusing on you.
So we have this plan, I don't know, it's not like a formal plan, but like when there's an issue, we talk, like my husband and I talk about it with each other. Then we kind of come up
Yeah,
with like, how are we going to approach it? We talk through different scenarios. Like usually I'm the one trying to think about the other person's perspective, like this is maybe why they're like saying this, or coming off like this because maybe something happened at, work, or
yeah,
something else is going on. They're in pain, whatever. And so it kind of helps put things in perspective, because sometimes you're just, thinking out of anger and resentment, and,
absolutely.
why, because it doesn't make sense to us why the other person's angry or giving you the silent treatment. So having that conversation ahead of time, and then we asked to have a conversation. Mom, dad, we need to talk. Can we sit down today at 8 o'clock and have a conversation, or could we go for a walk? I want to clear my mind. And
Yeah.
then we have this conversation, we explain the situation, get the other person's perspective, try to get their feelings out. And that's so hard. That takes like half the time to really get it out of
Yeah.
the other person, because you're not used to that. But it's important because you need to get the other person's perspective, and you know and so then we do that. But we know it's working, because our parents, and I think with in-laws it's difficult. They have a hard time coming to you, and especially their
Yeah.
daughter-in-law. They're not going to come tell the daughter-in-law, or oftentimes they don't often just come to the daughter-in-law and tell them that, oh, I don't like that this happened, or I don't like you did this. So recently, just even last week, we had some situation, so a situation in the home, and it was just awkward in the house. Something's bubbling, no one's saying
Yeah.
anything, everyone's just kind of like tiptoeing around each other. My mother-in-law on Sunday night, or Monday morning, she texts me and she's like, I want to talk to you and Manan when you have time. Can we go for a walk? And I mean, I was so happy seeing that text message because
Yeah.
there's only been a handful of times where my father-in-law has approached us to talk. My mom, I don't think would even have the courage to do that at this point, right? Like it takes a lot of courage to have
It
these difficult
does.
conversations.
And as
And
the
she texted us.
recipient, I can also imagine it can, for some people, cause a little bit of anxiety, like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Or what happened? Or
Mhm.
how's this going to go? Is this going to blow up in my face if you're not prepared?
Yes. Yeah. So it was, I was like, wow, okay, what is this about? And then obviously like it was about something about the weekend, like this awkward situation. I'm like, okay, maybe she'll actually share what's going on. And so then we went outside, we had a chat. My husband and I had like this pre-chat beforehand, and it was great. I mean, we all let it out. We all cried, like we had a little moment, but we talked openly. And the main thing at the end was, it's not about pointing fingers. We all have feelings. All feelings are okay. It's valid. What you're feeling is valid. There were some misunderstandings, expectations that were brought up, but at the end of the day, what's our goal here? Our goal is to build a good environment in the home where everybody feels supported. That's what a home
Yeah,
is. And we have two kids, they're 4 and 6. What kind of example are we going to share with them? I mean, they're little now. They're not going to really notice. Maybe they won't notice that, Ba's not talking, or, there's some awkwardness going on. But when they're older, they're going to remember, they're going to know that there's something weird going on in the family. And how is that going to grow into their personality growing up? So that's a big
absolutely.
topic we talk about. Like at the end of the day, we all have our feelings. We're not perfect, but this is our goal. We want to raise our kids in this environment. So how can we work towards that shared goal? And that works really well. And so we use that a lot when we have these difficult conversations, especially around boundaries.
Yeah, that's so important. And I actually think that kids do pick up on a lot. They may not be able to verbalize or label it, but they can sense a change in energy. They totally get it. Again, they may not know
Hmm.
how to label it, like, oh, Ba's not talking because she's angry. They just know Ba's off and Mummy's off. And, everyone's quieter, but they move on because kids are kids and they're so incredibly resilient. But I think it is important to keep them and ourselves in mind. And I love that you guys continue to verbalize that shared goal, that we want to create an environment that is supportive, and then we all feel safe, right? Our home is our safe space. It's, we're supposed to feel protected in our home. And when you're coming home to just a uncomfortable feeling, where you don't feel like you're in your own space, that could be pretty jarring for anybody. I would
Hmm.
never want that for anybody. Have you always believed in boundaries or always had boundaries? Did it always come naturally to you, or was this more of a learned behavior?
I think it was a learned behavior. I think we all set boundaries in different ways. You don't call it
Mhm.
boundaries, like around your
Yeah.
screen time use or
Mm.
your exercise routine. You
Yeah.
have your routine or your study habits. You don't really call it boundaries, but it is boundaries. But I think in this sense, like with relationships, with family, with friends, I think it gets more important as you get older and you have these additional um, responsibilities, and you're being tugged in so many different ways, and difficult things like conflicts come up. So I think it's something that you have to kind of learn as well, how to improve your boundary setting skills. And
Yes.
I love just learning about better ways to communicate, and I think it's important for our kids to see that too. So yeah. I think the
Absolutely.
in-laws topic is really, it's something I talk about a lot because I know a lot of people struggle with relationships with in-laws. And, obviously we live with the parents, so it's a little bit different.
Mhm.
But even without living with parents, it's challenging because you may still experience some of those guilty type of
Absolutely.
behaviors and resentment through
Absolutely.
text
And
or
there are
yeah.
many people that live very close to their family members. And so, same neighborhood or down the street. And I think it's also important to still continue to hold boundaries, even though they're accessible or you are accessible. It is okay to, in a way, say that we do also have our own lives, even though
Hmm.
we're close. And I find it really difficult when people have their entire family in the same city. I don't know if that's your situation.
Somewhat. I
Somewhat.
mean,
Yeah.
we have a lot of family members and a lot of friends in this area. Um, so we do have, like, I call my house Grandma Central because we always have people at our house. But it's all
Yeah.
good. Like, it's
Which
nice.
is a beautiful thing.
It's
I don't want to
beautiful.
discount that. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing, but we just need to work harder on our boundaries.
Yes.
I once had a client who had basically her entire family in the same city. And I'm talking about like aunts, uncles, cousins, parents, in-laws, the in-laws family. And every weekend it was someone's birthday, someone's anniversary, someone's something, right? To the point where she came to me and said, Flora, I haven't even seen my own family. They were a family of four. They had two young children. And I can't remember the last time where I had a quote unquote staycation or just a chill night at home with my kids and my husband, because we're always running around to different events because then we're guilt tripped and we're shamed for not showing up for our family. We're seen as, not team players. We'll get calls from our parents or our in-laws, or there are, underhanded or backhanded comments where it makes us feel bad. And here we are running around and not really being present with our kids, who is our uh, main focus. How do you react to the guilt tripping, or even the infamous saying, like, what will people say if you don't show up? What will
Hmm.
they think of us? What is kind of your go-to approach, especially with having family within the household or your in-laws within the household?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be consistent with your boundary and know what you want, right? My mom is like social butterfly. She always has people over. Even we don't live too far. We live like 40 minutes away, so she's
Okay.
always like hosting and doing things, and she calls us. She used to call us a lot more to come over just like randomly. I'm like, "Okay, I can't do that every weekend, especially like you're calling like 2 hours beforehand."
Yeah.
So we don't go. Like, we tell her we can't make it. Like, we don't tell her why. Sometimes we tell her why, but she knows now, and because we've been consistent, that we'll come when we can make it. But we've had to kind of hold that boundary, because then otherwise you don't have time for yourself, you don't have time for your family. We have a very busy social life.
Mm-hmm.
We also, volunteer, and so, there's constantly things going on every evening, and now we my husband and I were very good about our calendar. One night he goes plays pickleball, one day I go play pickleball. I had mom's night, I had a work event. Like,
Yeah.
every night gets so busy, and today I have like 3 events. Like, there's just
Mm-hmm.
so much going on, and then you lose your family time in the process, and you have to prioritize that. So we've been really intentional to make sure at least like once a week or twice a week, it's just like us. I just want to spend
Yeah.
time with us. And even if it's like a couple hours, having that quiet time, but like that's going to be like Saturday morning after baseball and before a birthday party. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to spend a couple hours just like hanging out. At the end of the day, this is what's best for your family and this is
Yeah.
what's best for you. You can't burn out. Like, this week I had so much going on. I had migraines from just like driving and,
Oh,
being on awake and not sleeping. Like, yes, I went to sleep at 9:30. I'm like, I need to hold a boundary with my cell phone. Like, this is
correct.
causing problems in my life.
Correct.
So Yeah, it's a lot
I
of
think it's
constant like
important.
self-awareness.
It is, and it's important to block out like non-negotiable time with your family, with yourself. Take the time to figure out where you are, where your body is, and where your partner is as well. You guys may be on different pages when it comes to energy, when it comes to boundary setting with ourselves. So it's super important. And yes, that phone is a big culprit. So setting boundaries with our phones, with social media, with any tech for that matter. I mean, there was a point in time where I was constantly listening to something, a podcast or an audio book or an interview. Something was in my ear all the time until the family came home. And one day I remember I just put on my noise canceling headphones and I went out for a walk, nothing in my ears. It was beautiful. That silence was great, and not being constantly stimulated by whether it's audio or visual by tech was freeing. And it actually got my juices flowing too, like my creative juices. Sometimes we're most creative in silence. And so
I
I
agree.
urge people to try that, having boundaries with yourself. What is a boundary that you still struggle with today?
My phone. I still struggle
Yeah,
with
I
my
think we
boundary with my
all
phone.
do.
It was becoming an issue, obviously, like, with work balance and just also being like on social media. And so my husband and I have this thing, like we'll give each other like a look or just like a reminder that, hey, put your phone down. It's family time. If we
Yeah,
kind of lapse, but we have a family phone corner and we keep
good.
our phones there.
Yeah.
We have to set those boundaries for ourselves.
Absolutely. So important. And another ad that I may suggest here is to have phone free times and phone free zones within the household, or tech free,
Yes.
which is so helpful. And it goes and it applies to everyone in the household, regardless. And so even at the dinner table, that is a tech free zone. We don't have iPads, phones, unless my husband's on call, but he has an Apple Watch. So he will announce I'm on call. So I'm checking my watch. That's why. But
Mhm.
otherwise, for that, it doesn't take that long to eat. For 30 to 60 minutes to be off of your tech is so important. And then sometimes, if we're super busy, we'll bring out the iPad and FaceTime with our in-laws or with my parents. And it's still family time, and we're still
Yes.
having conversations and playing catch up. So again, it still is within the purpose of being present and keeping our time sacred without sitting and scrolling or being distracted by all the little pop-ups that come up. I actually gave up my Apple Watch because I couldn't stand the interruptions. I can't stand the buzzing. And I'm like, I am always on my phone anyway for just work in general. Why do I need this annoying thing on my wrist just reminding me even more? I can easily pick up my phone on my own terms. So anyway, that's why I gave up my
Yeah, and it's a
Apple Watch.
pet peeve in conversations because if you hear your phone buzzing or your watch buzzing, you're likely going to like look up from the conversation, what kind of message are you sending to the other
Yeah,
person,
yeah,
And so
that's
that's the
absolutely
boundary
right.
that when we go for walks, we try to leave our phones at home
That's
because
really
otherwise
important.
one of us is checking the
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really important. Boundaries are for you. They are rules for yourself. They are not rules for others. That is a fact. Because once you try to set boundaries for other people, you are trying to control them. And that's a gray zone. That's a messy gray zone. Because guess what? Surprising. People don't want to be controlled. So your boundaries are for you, not for other people. So don't set yourself up for failure. Figure out your purpose. Figure out why you want to set your boundary for yourself. You can't control someone else's actions. I'm going to repeat this statement over and over again. You can't control someone else's actions, but you can control what you do, what you say, how you respond, how you react. And that's what boundaries help you do. So let's quickly talk about pushback, which often happens. So sometimes people don't respect your boundary statement, AKA your boundaries in general. This is especially common if you are not a person that holds boundaries. So if they are not used to hearing it, it's not going to digest immediately. It's not going to click for them immediately. So it's important to stand your ground. Number one, stand your ground, reiterate. You will sound like a broken record, and that is okay. Politely but firmly repeat your statement. Number two, do not give in. The pressure is real. The guilt is real. But remember, your well-being is the most important. Number three, it may be time to reevaluate your relationship. So if someone continuously disrespects your boundaries, it might be worth reconsidering the nature of your relationship. Now, I'm not talking about cutting someone out of your life. That is really never my goal. And I only advise that in extreme situations or dangerous situations. But maybe you could change how you are in contact with this person or the frequency in contact with this person, distance, the quantity of time that you are with this person or different scenarios. All of this could change in response to a boundary not being respected. So I want you to remember these pearls. I'm going to repeat this, so please write this down. For your boundary statement, take into consideration your tone, word choice, volume, facial expression, and perspective, aka your compassion card. And to continue with that success, have your responses ready with certain triggering people or scenarios. Let go of that person's reaction. Practice your response, your boundary statement, and pivot if it's not working. Understand that holding boundaries is not about being selfish. It is about self-care. It is about respect. Remember, you must be consistent in enforcing your boundaries. If you waver, guess what? People don't get the picture. So, sound like a broken record. That is okay. Practice saying no. It's hard, but it's essential. Remember, every yes to something you don't want to do is a no to something you need.
So it does take time to build that relationship, but again, you're only in control of your own reaction. You can't change, and you can make a request. You can, it's all about asking for the request. I need you to do this, but that may not happen because we can't control other people's reactions or behaviors. So it's really, boundary setting is really about protecting yourself as well at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Verbiage matters, tone matters. There's so much that plays a huge role into setting boundaries. And you're right. It is a trial and error because everyone reacts a little bit differently. And we don't want to make a volatile situation. We want to create as much peace as possible and just cohesiveness, which again, takes time, takes practice, takes a little bit of pivoting as needed. You guys know your family members and friends the best. So I think you had mentioned this before, but what is a method that you would recommend for people to start if they want to hold boundaries with their family members? Is there a certain verbiage or something that someone can use?
Yeah, I think there's three things that I would kind of take away when you're having or looking to have these conversations. One is understanding your own boundaries, like being self-aware of your needs and what are you really looking for? What would you be okay with? Because, again, if things don't go ideally as you'd like, person may not change. What would you be okay with? What would you be okay with letting go of when it comes to parenting decisions or respecting your time and privacy, right? The second thing, I think when you're having the conversation, using that soft startup approach, and I feel about the situation when this happens, because, and I need. So I feel about, because, and I need. So practicing that when you have the conversation, And then the third is make it about a shared goal, you know, having what is at the end of the day you both could mutually agree on. You know, it doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be agreeing on the same outcome, but agreeing to, you want to keep that relationship open, or you want to do best for the kids, or, you know, whatever it may be. Try to make it about that shared goal.
Going back to those examples, the I feel statements, can you give us an example, the I feel because when?
Yeah. So, for example, unsolicited parenting advice. You know, we get it all the time, especially if you're a new parent or a seasoned parent, you get
Mm-hmm.
advice all the time, right? You know, when I was your age, we did this, or we didn't have sleep training, or we didn't do all this organic food. You know, the list is endless.
Yes.
You could say, I feel overwhelmed when we get a lot of unsolicited parenting advice. I need that independence to make our own parenting decisions, because we'll learn our own way. We will come to you when we need your help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, some version of that
Yeah. And I
would be
think that could be
helpful.
applicable to a lot of different scenarios. And I think the I feel approach is a good way to direct the attention on yourself instead of blaming the other person. And also verbalizing the behavior, not blaming the person. So, I feel overwhelmed when there is unsolicited advice versus I feel overwhelmed when you are giving me advice that I don't ask for. Or I
Yes.
feel overwhelmed by you. You're acting, you're overbearing. A lot of these labels obviously are harmful to the relationship, but they're hurtful and it doesn't help that overall purpose that you're talking about. So these were great ads, Niki. Where could people follow you, find you? We'll put it on our podcast information page.
Yeah, so I'm active on Instagram, Niki Patel, Niki.Patel, two L's underscore. And then I also started a platform. There's a lot of Patels out there. So
There are, you're right.
to spell it out a little bit. But I also started a platform last year called Home Shanti. And it was inspired by these types of conversations, you know, relationships, in laws, boundaries, parenting, conscious parenting, all of that. So I started that last year. We have chai chats with my mother-in-law.
I
We talk
love
about
that.
some of these topics. I have some on YouTube as well for, you know, a lot of people ask their parent, they want to send these to their in-laws.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, some of these are posted on YouTube as well. But I also have several resources for families, parents, couples, and also a boundary setting guide. So if you just want to kind of get started, trying, you know, learning about this, then I do have a boundary setting guide that kind of goes through the framework as well. It gives examples specifically in the South Asian community. And I also have a relationship reset masterclass that has 4 different modules on different hot topics in relationships. One of them is specifically on setting boundaries in the South Asian family dynamics. And it also goes through different examples like Rahul and Priya, and they have this conflict with in-laws and navigating it. I mean, it's very real world and helps you kind of put that framework in perspective with the case study. So all of that is available on our page, and you can find it and access it. And really just here to help serve like you
Yeah.
in couples, families, in navigating a lot of these challenges.
That's amazing. We are going to put all of that info in the podcast info page. So if any of our listeners want to follow Niki, go to the podcast information page on your listening platform and click. We'll link everything there. We'll also link the Home Shanti Instagram page as well, so they can look at all the amazing resources that you offer. All right, Beyond Family, thank you so, so much for being here. And just remember, this podcast, my friend, is a two-way conversation. I want to hear from you. Niki wants to hear from you. So if something in today's episode resonated, please share on social media, DM the both of us, share it with your parents, your siblings, your friends, your colleagues. Everyone needs to hear a little bit more about boundaries and how they are helpful. Let's continue to help each other to live beyond our labels and boxes. The best way to support the show is to hit that follow button or subscribe on your listening platform. Don't forget to leave a quick rating, a review, share the episode. Your support truly, truly means the entire world to me. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, remember, mindset is medicine. Keep showing up for yourself, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Thank you so much for joining and spending your precious time here with me. As someone who prioritizes her energy, I am so grateful that you chose to spend yours here. To help me help you, please take an extra 30 seconds of your time to rate and review the podcast on your listening platform. For more tips and a behind-the-scenes look into my life, follow me on Instagram at Dr. Flora Sinha. That's Dr. Flora Sinha. Finally, connecting with you truly fills my cup. So DM me on Instagram, email me at florasinhamd@gmail.com, repost if you love this episode. I love hearing from you. I am so grateful for you and cannot wait to be back for the next episode. Bye.